Hello and welcome to another session in the Skewdio. Today we are joined by Neil Proudman, a 45-year veteran of the gas industry, and of course our very own Gandalf the Great, Bob Murray, known to Skewbers. Neil, I started to attempt an introduction to you and you have such a wealth of experience. I already ran out of list of titles to remember. So why don't you take us back to the very beginning, if you would, and just give us a brief overview of your career to date.
I joined West Midlands Gas as a fresh-faced 16-year-old in December 1979, and I was a student apprentice. So when we were at college, when we went to college, we were working on the tools, went through transmission, distribution, utilization, getting a really good grounding in the industry, and actually, the first group I went with after college was the utilization group, which was installing central heating and gas fires and everything else. And I was convinced that's what I wanted to do. Convinced. And then I got my time with gas distribution, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. The first day, it was like, I love this. And the whole kind of working on a street crew, and working on we talked earlier about working on the jackhammer and what lessons you learn from the jackhammer. And really that really shaped my career, that experience. And I describe myself as a gas engineer, but primarily my specialist area is gas distribution primarily. And that's my expertise. I do know about transmission, but I wouldn't consider myself a transmission engineer. And then, lately in the US, I did manage a few different groups, and I did have an electric construction group for a while. So I kind of learned a lot from that. And in 1979 I started. By 2001, I'd gone from being an apprentice to an area, kind of an engineer assistant, supervisor, and then manager. In fact, I was the manager of this area here.
Oh,
so we had an office in Tatchbrook Road, Leamington, just down the road. Ron Bannister, Dave Payne, and Chris McCabe were the supervisors, and then the patch was Leamington, Warwick, Stratford, and Redditch. And Paul Frost and Ronnie Foxall were the two supervisors in Redditch, and I worked out of 365 Stratford Road, Shirley, and it was all part of what was South East District under Trevor Allen, and working with legends like Jeff Ansell and others along the way. And it was during that period that I got the opportunity to go and work on the emergency meter work project, which was really the separation of the commodity and the pipelines. It was the creation of Centrica and the creation of Transco. And it was out of that project that I got my first senior manager role, and it was the emergency and meter work kind of manager. It was the old SM1 in North Wales. Well, of course, not many Englishmen ventured to Wales, and people were saying, "Oh, I wouldn't go there if I was you." And I went to North Wales, absolutely loved it. Worked with Jim Ainsworth and others, Dave Perry, and some great folks, learning from people all along the way. And then my job in North Wales got to become Wales, and I became the head of operations for all of Wales, then the Southwest. And for a little while, actually, South London, when I was supporting one of our colleagues who was got some issues in London. So yeah, and it was during that period that Rob Varian actually pulled me to one side from a meeting and said, "Are you interested in going to America?" Because we'd been acquired by National Grid by then, and National Grid had acquired territory in Massachusetts, Mass Electric, and also Niagara Mohawk, which is a small gas and electric company in upstate New York and Syracuse. So Rob Varian said, "Are you interested in being a vice president in New York?"
Wow.
So I was thinking, wow, the vice president. Little did I know there were more vice presidents than there were team leaders. But I thought I was going to be the vice president. And I had this image of New York. I didn't even know New York was a state at that point. So I was going to be inline skating in Central Park every Sunday morning. I was having the whole Friends experience. And I got off the plane in May in Syracuse, New York, which is closer to Canada than it is to Manhattan. And there was still snow on the ground. And I had one day, literally just one interview after the other. And I thought, you know what? I really didn't want to leave Wales. I loved living in Wales. I loved working in Wales. I was embedded in the community. I was involved in Welsh rugby and everything else. But I knew I couldn't spend the next 20 years of my career there. At some point, somebody would want to move me, or there'd be a restructure and I'd be doing something different or working for someone different. So I took the chance and I went to the US.
Yeah.
And I went over as the vice president of gas delivery, which really was an asset management job. And everybody who knows me will know, yeah, Neil is not an asset manager. Well, Wayne Jones is an asset manager, who was my asset manager in Wales. Neil's not really an asset manager. But the most interesting part of that was, and I think the thing to bring out for this, what's it like being an Englishman, going somewhere else? Well, it was a bit like my first day in Wales. My first day in South Wales, one of the staff said to me, "What's up? Couldn't they find a Welshman to do that job?" And you kind of think, okay, all right. I go all the way to America, and a guy called Gary Panabianco, who was like the spokesperson, great engineer. What are you doing here? When are you going to turn this into Transco? And I think when I look back on my kind of relationships and how I've managed to be the Englishman in Wales and then the Englishman in the US, it depends on what kind of Englishman you are. I always had a deep respect for the Welsh. Bob will tell you that. I always had a deep respect for its independent culture and its independent language. So I wasn't really becoming that Englishman in Wales. I got involved in the community and I did all the things that, all the things that Welsh people do. I celebrated St David's Day and everything else, got involved in Welsh rugby. I love Welsh rugby to this day, which is heartbreaking at the moment. But that's another story. But the same with the US. I remember, Gary Panabianco challenging me that morning. And I said to him, I tell you what, because in answer to the question, are you going to turn this into Transco? Because they were very defensive of how they work. And I said, no, I'm not. I said, I've got some skills. You've got some skills. How about we put those skills together and we make something kind of special? And Gary and I are still friends to this day. And the 2-year assignment turned into 3. I got leveraged some friends in Michigan, in Detroit, to come and help us with some low dig technology and a few other things. We brought the national efficiency team over from Transco, then National Grid, as it probably was, National Grid Transco, over, and we started to share things. And I got a bit of a reputation for somebody who could implement best practices. So for a while, I ran a best practice group. And then from there, really, it was the big electric construction group. It was the first time they'd used contractors for electric work in Massachusetts. And skills and capabilities, the guy who built the contracts wasn't necessarily the right guy to execute on the contracts. And I'd been a big ops guy. I'd been an ops guy in the past. So they said, would you take over this group? So the 2 years turned into 3. And then John Pettigrew, who's now the CEO of National Grid, came over. And he was like, do you want to stay? You can be part of my team. So I worked for John for a while. And then when John was coming back after 7 years now, he said, are you coming or are you staying? I'm like, well, the kids had grown up here. Both of my kids have got American accents. I liked where I lived and everything else. So the company allowed me to localize in the US. So I got my green card in 2010.
Wow, that's an achievement in itself.
Yeah, I got my green card in 2010, and I got my citizenship on the 4th of July.
No way.
In 2017. Yeah, born on the 4th of July. But yeah, and then, during that period, I worked. Chris Train and Steve Holiday were coming over, and they were looking to grow the business in the US. So I worked for Chris Train doing the due diligence on the acquisition of Keyspan. And then also New England Gas, which was Rhode Island, which was really changed the face of the US business. And trying to cut a long story short, ended up in doing a back office support job. And the idea was that having somebody from an operational background managing the back office support, I'd kind of know what operations wanted and needed. It wasn't a great fit for me, but I did learn a ton, and I learned a ton about process, which wasn't something that was really, it wasn't an arrow in my kind of, it wasn't a tool in my toolbox up until then. But I learned about the power of process. And then there was an incident, a gas incident, and they asked me, can you come and investigate this? Because because you were a bit of a gas guy once, weren't you? I'm like, oh yeah, I was, yeah. So Nick Stavropoulos, who is a legend in the industry in the US. And Bill Akeley, I can remember Bill saying to me, "Don't get too comfortable. We want you to run this." Because they decided, they were going to make a change in the leadership. Bill says to me, "So, don't get too comfortable. We'd like you to run this temporarily while we find somebody really good to do this."
Charming.
My answer to Bill was, "Now you've given it me, you're going to have to prize it out of my cold, dead, clammy hands." And probably 5 or 6 years later, I was still in the job, which was great. And then took the opportunity to leave National Grid. There was a restructure, and then joined Liberty in New Hampshire, which is the territory that actually in New Hampshire, which National Grid sold to Liberty. And then I was there for almost 4 years until a recent company restructure eliminated my role. So now, if I was in the US, I'd say I'm a man of leisure. But a man of leisure. So when I think about it,
Oh my gosh, you don't strike me as someone who sits still. So I don't trust that title will stay.
But there's been a great career, and actually, when people ask me about it, and I think back, and they're saying, how did you do this and that and the other? I don't think about. There's moments in time I think about where I could have gone one way or the other, but the determining factor was people. I've always been able to reach out to people. I mean, they talk about your network being your net worth. I've always been able to reach out to people and say, "Hey, can you just listen to me? Can I just bounce this off you?" and everything else. And most recently, going for fellowship with the institution, I reached out to Bob and said, "Can you mentor me on this?"
Do you know what really struck me about your story there? You were naming so many people, not just first names and last names. And it was really jumping out at me how your story was driven by people
It
and the
is,
people who shaped it. And I've not heard that from
yeah,
anyone else who's come in the Skewdio. It's
yeah.
really interesting.
And it's absolutely true. I've been blessed really with having some great people around me and people I could go to. And one of the things I try and do now is give that back. So just talking to the new recruits a few minutes ago, that was great. New folks entering it into our industry is a great thing. So that, to me, when I leave here, that's going to be
Bob, obviously Gandalf the Great.
being with Bob here, and Nicola, and that's going to be one of the things I'm going to think, wow, that is awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I even the people I didn't like, even the people that were really, I worked for some really tough folks. I'm not going to name any of them, but anybody who knows me will know the ones. It's been a tough time. I've learned from, and yeah, I've thought, yeah, it's, you learn from all your experiences. Some leaders I've thought, you know what, if I get to be in your position, that isn't what I'm going to do. So you learn. The other thing I've done as well is people who know me, who are listening to this, will know I've made some mistakes in my time. What I have done is learned to forgive myself for those, and actually learn from them, and kind of said, "Okay, Neil, that didn't quite work out as planned. How are we going to do something different?" Yeah. So I tend to take myself through that. The difficulty is sometimes that can be like one of those spirals that you can't get out of. So what I've tried to do is just kind of do my own after action review.
Yeah.
And say, all right, okay, what did we learn from that? We'll do something differently next time. But throughout my career, really, it's the story of my career is the people who have influenced me and the people who have taken time to help me and guide me. There was a time during my apprenticeship where West Midlands Gas were going to fire me. West Midlands Gas was going to fire me. I was about 19 years old, and Francis Salt, who was my he was assistant district engineer at the time, was also the Nalgo union rep, and he dragged me into this disciplinary, and he just looked at my training officer and said, either fire him or give him another chance. Neil, get up, we're walking out. And I walked out, I was like, Fran, and he's like, they'll give you another chance.
Oh.
Do not mess it up. And I didn't. So I went back and they gave me another chance, and I said, thank you very much. Yeah. So yeah. And so those chances, the chances I've been given, the time people have invested in me and the opportunity. You know, when that training officer who was about to fire me retired, in his retirement speech, he graced himself with I was the one who turned Neil Proudman around.
Oh.
I'm like, I'll give you that one. I'll give you that.
Bob, can you take us back to the first time you met Neil? Can you remember what it was that struck you about him?
That's a difficult question.
Was it my rugged good looks, Bob? I wanted to make it. There's so much common in the industry we started. Now, the only difference at our start was I started in transmission and construction, so not distribution. I eventually became distribution engineer. So that's the only difference. Everything else is running parallel. We've even done benchmarking abroad together, you know, in the same businesses. So he has that complete belief about kind of health and safety. He believes no one should ever go door. That's the big one that unites us. And we've always worked well together. There's always been an honesty and Christ, Bob, I wouldn't have done that. Because, well, you got learning thing. You could,
Yeah.
and yeah, I wouldn't have made that decision. You know, I make decisions, you know, kind of stuff. So yeah, our lives have been such in parallel, and it's true. And likewise, when I need some help, but I'd reach out. And it even came down to when Neil first moved to South Wales, I was still there then. He said, "Oh, we can never go out. We don't have a babysitter." I said, "Also." So my eldest daughter used to be a babysitter.
Oh, really?
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
Now Neil's children, one's doing a PhD.
Yeah.
And one's a Top Gun in the US Air Force. So yeah, it's amazing how your lives, and we've always kept in touch. We have this love of rugby. We have a love of the industry that we work in. And, you know, there's never a gap.
Yeah.
We might go 2 years, 4 years, not see each other. But then we're back together. It's like it was yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's the kind
Sign of a true friendship.
But yeah, and huge professional respect as well, because everything that Neil said that he's done is absolutely 100%. And, you know, and I've been in those dark places as well. I know if I needed to talk to someone, I could just pick the phone wherever I had to them.
Yeah.
Etc. So that's kind of, but the first time we met, it was just working in the same office for a while. And I was always going to be leaving and coming to the West Midlands. That was always going to be a plan when Transco was going to be set up. That was predetermined. I would be in Solihull to start off with, and then I go into Central England, etc. But even then, we were always, because we were in the same business, doing the same things, we were always in touch. We work with
And meeting up at the different events and things, you know.
Yeah.
But
Brothers and dances and that kind of. He's not a very good dancer, but
Is he not? Okay, there you go.
I'm much
Great man, not so great
I've got
dancer.
cowboy boots.
Cowboy boots, like, how did you not even see those?
Thought I'd, you know, and they're worn as well. They're well worn. They're like,
That is amazing.
I've got 2 left feet, so that's why we're great dancers.
Okay, great. But talk to me a bit about the transition for you then from moving from the UK to America, because that is not just, I mean, you've mentioned your family there. That is not just a huge shift from a personal level. And yes, you speak the same language, but we both know it's very different words. So even getting through a sentence with people in North America can be a struggle.
That can be a struggle, yeah.
Talk to me about some of the learnings you've had over the years, not just from a personal point of view, but also for the difference in gas industry.
So one of the things I really learned quickly, and actually I picked it up from the kids. My daughter was 3, and living in South Wales, she had a very strong kind of South Wales accent. She was the very kind of Gavin and Stacey accent, a very strong Welsh Valleys accent. And she went into school one day, and she said she was really upset when she come back. She went to a Montessori school because, and she said nobody understood what I was saying. And her language started to change very, very quickly. And it wasn't something intentionally she did, but she started speaking the same language as all of the people. I started to realize then that, you know what, that footpath's a sidewalk now.
Yeah.
And that tomato,
Tomato.
in the same way as they didn't realize that Clark Kent was Superman just because of the glasses, I would say tomato, and people would look at me and say,
I know, yeah.
So tomato. Oh, no tomato. Hold the tomato.
Yeah.
So what I started to was really localize and started to talk the same language, trucks and all this kind of stuff. And crews. Yeah, I've used that too. Crew chief rather than team leader.
Yeah.
So all of those little things, I said little the way
Little.
Americans did, didn't I?
Yeah.
All those little things.
Yeah.
So the Americans think I've still got a British accent, and I'm like, well, when I go back, people can see it's a little bit different. But no, so that was an important part of it. And then also thinking about, because the US is still on we're still in pounds and inches. So low pressure is up to 12 inches. So anybody who remembers the old Mears flow calculators, you throw the blue one away, you've got to get the green one back out. So yeah, all our pipes are in inches, all our pressures in pounds and inches, 36-inch mains with 6-inch water gauge in them in the middle of Boston. So you've really got to, start to embrace that and really understand how different it is. The other thing as well is, I'll give you an example about, live mains insertion. So when I left the UK, I was like 70%, 80% target for low dig. Well, low dig's fine in the US, but when your annulus in your low pressure main is only running at 6.5 inches, that isn't a lot. And then also you've got all of this space and everything else. So sometimes it's actually, and we did try and do some live insertion, but really because of the limits on low pressure, it didn't make it feasible. But at least we tried.
Keyhole surgery and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All the stuff we haven't seen in the UK. Had that one.
Oh, wow.
Just to digress slightly, my children went through the same thing. Birmingham Valley's accent to come to Birmingham.
Yeah.
So they had to become Brummies. My shoes are really always
Yeah.
out of the face compared to the Valley's accent. So it's funny how our lives have been in parallel.
Yeah.
So
one of my kind of claims to fame in the US is I can do the Peaky Blinders accent. Because people say to me, did you watch the Peaky Blinders? And I'll I won't do it now. But because I worked in Birmingham for a long time, the Garrison pub on the Garrison Lane, I can probably name a few crew chiefs who used to be in there on a Friday afternoon. I knew exactly where they was back decades ago, of course. But no, I think really localizing is really important. I know people who went to the US and they would download Coronation Street every day. It's the difference between being a tourist and a traveler. And I talk to my kids now, don't be a tourist, be a traveler.
Yeah.
And really just embracing the things. I remember the guys, the guys in Buffalo saying to me, do you want to come to a Buffalo Bills game, which is my first NFL game? And there's two ways you can approach an NFL game. You think, oh, this isn't rugby. Look at all that. They got the pads on and everything else. But then when you realize, actually, it's on grass. It's an oval-shaped ball, but actually the game is very different.
Yeah.
And you start appreciating the US for what it is and stop translating it into what you know and start to accept it's like learning a new language.
Yeah.
And I think that was the transition, really. And actually, it was an interesting time because there were some folks in the US who really didn't want these imports from the UK to stay around the business. Some of my oldest friends in the US now who were advocating that, no, we need to bring them over and send them back, kind of boomerang Brits. Bring them over and then send them back.
Yeah.
And when you get one that says, oh, can I stay for a bit? They're, I don't know about that. And some of those now are actually, great friends of mine. So the key really is to kind of localize. But again, that conversation I had with Gary around, I've got some skills, you've got some skills. Let's put them together and see what we can make of this.
I'd be curious to know what your observations were on the UK, on the British gas industry from America as well, because sometimes when you're a couple of steps removed from something, you almost lose that emotional attachment to changing times. Did you have any observations as, progressions were happening in the US and the UK, that things that were happening in the US that you thought, oh, that's
a little bit.
Take that here, or
there were some things that happened in the UK that was like tugging on my heartstrings.
Really?
So when National Grid sold off in the first sale, and they sold off Wales and the West and the Scotia networks and everything else, Mike Jasanis, who was the US CEO, all the senior leadership in National Grid had been given this little plaque, and you could take out like Wales and the West, and underneath it would say, Macquarie, wasn't it?
Yes.
It would say Macquarie, who they'd sold it to and how much it was for. And he called me in the office and he says, "I think you'd like this, would you?" And I had it in my office for a long time. And I used to the Wales and the West bit, I used to take out and think, because there was a point where I realized that actually the industry had changed so much, there was nothing to go back to. I wasn't going back to my old job as head of operations for Wales and the Southwest. The industry had changed so much. So at some point, you kind of got to let it go.
Yeah.
The nice thing was, things like social media, things like LinkedIn. I came over for a few conferences occasionally, so I managed to kind of, keep my hand in. But no, one of the things I like about the industry is how the different networks are working together, particularly around hydrogen. I like the fact that IGM have got the hydrogen repository that we can all tap into and everything else. And it really seems as if, in the US, we've got 50 states. I know our president would like to create a 51st, but we won't talk about that. There are 50 states, and every company within every state seems to be doing their own thing.
Yeah.
Whereas when I talk to folks over here, Chris Clark came over at an invitation of ours for AGA to talk about safety and things. But and actually he did a really good presentation on what Wales and the West are doing around hydrogen. And it was great to see that, Wales and the West are doing this, and then somebody else is doing this, and they're not all doing the same thing. They've all got their own part of the jigsaw. So I like the fact that the UK seem to be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, seem to be working together to solve some of the big problems in our industry. So this is the bit where I sound like an American. So people say, well, if we can do that here, why can't you do that over there?
Yeah.
So put it into perspective, you can take the entire UK and fit it into Texas.
Yeah.
And when I think about the US and I think about regulation and everything else, it's very different. So we don't have a HSE, but we do have OSHA. And OSHA is kind of our safety regulator nationally. And then when you think about the codes that we work to, we have a federal code. So the federal code, OSHA is part of the Department of Labor. So if you have a serious accident, somebody gets injured, and Bob's absolutely right, one of our common denominators is safety. Safety of our network, safety of the people who work on it, safety of the general public. It's a multifaceted dimension when we think about safety. It's the holistic safety, not just you and you. It's the bigger picture. But yeah, so if OSHA will come in if somebody's had a serious accident. But in terms of how you put pipe in the ground, how you transport gas, that is PHMSA, which is part of the Department of Transportation, because invariably we're transporting something. So PHMSA is Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, I think, something like that. So ours is, our book is about this thick. It's Title 49, and it's section 178 to 199. So if you read that, that's pretty much how we do things. So that's common. What's different then, I'll try and boil the ocean, is that every state then, so a state can't dilute federal law. So the state of Massachusetts couldn't sell the state. New Hampshire couldn't say, yeah, we don't like that, so we'll lower that. You can attend a gas escape in 3 hours instead of an hour. No, but they can concentrate it. So every state, whether it's they call themselves the department, state government have a department, whether they call it the Department of Public Utilities or the Public Services Commission, whoever it is, have a regulatory body that manage their utilities business. And they manage their utilities business for things like rate cases, but also in terms of your compliance with Title 49. And not just compliance with Title 49, but compliance with Title 49 and whatever additions have been put on. So that's their role. So it's a multifaceted regulatory body. And one of the things I try and, talk to when folks come over, I'll say, look, the state of New York isn't like, Warwick County Council. It's not like the county of Warwickshire. This is a state that can leverage fines that are so severe that your share price is going down. They're that big. They're almost like they're state governments, and some of those states are as big as countries. So they're very, very powerful, and people really, that's the one fundamental when you get to the US. Hey Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. This is different, and state regulation is different. One of the first things that my folks did when I was up in upstate New York is took me to Albany. So the state government headquarters for New York isn't in New York City. New York City think it is. It's actually in Albany, New York, which is in upstate New York. Yeah. And the regulators and the commissioners sit there and you justify everything you've done. And your rate case, just like rate cases in the UK, you submit your rate case and you go through all the due diligence and everything else, and your ROE comes out of that. So, but it is a very different regulatory regime, and anybody who underestimates the power of state government will end up catching a cold.
Bob, what was it like for you watching Neil's career progression from overseas?
Brilliant. Brilliant. Because we shared some of the experiences. I left National Grid. I've been there 30 years. Pretty fantastic years. I never crossed out one name from my contact list, etc. Left under fabulous circumstances. Then when I ran a commercial transporter, RGT, IDNO, now, etc. 6.5 wonderful years. We were always in touch over that time. And then I joined Skanska for 5.5 years, worked in various parts of the world. And so, yeah, it was like that, almost like a shared experience. And, and then I joined Ensign with Shashi.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the rest is history.
The rest is history. And Nick as well.
Nick
Evans, sorry, Nicola.
Yeah.
She always says only her mother calls her Nicola.
Right.
But her mother in you.
Yes,
How did you come to know Nick?
So Nick worked with us in Wales and the West. She was one of our engineers, and it was very clear that she was always, she was, to call her high potential would be disingenuous, actually. She was always good at, she'd always got something about her. And she was very good at what she did, and had got a presence, and you can see that now, that she's got a personality, got a presence. We were always good friends. We always worked together very well, and it's been a pleasure to see how her career has blossomed. In fact, I my certificate from iGEM, I'd like to buy another one just to get Nicola's signature on it. Because
it's President signs it.
Yeah, it's President signs it. So I might just say, I've lost all my certificates. Can I have another one?
But
can Nicola sign it, please? Yeah. And the interesting thing about iGEM is the very first, so again, the very first iGEM meeting I went to was in London, when we were in London. And the president did, the president did his kind of inaugural address. And then the president's wife got up, because it was the partners the partners program, and said, "Ladies, let us leave the gentlemen to their business." It's like something from Downton Abbey.
Yeah. When was this?
This was like in the 80s.
Oh,
probably.
no.
So when you think about, and actually there were people in the room that just didn't, like Liz Spielin and a few other, Hillary Buxton's another legend of the industry. When you think about how much it's moved, my other passion is I was involved in the Pride network at National Grid. I some great experiences with the Pride group, who are great friends even now. Now I've left, they still invite me to everything. And then also I was chair of the DEI Council for Liberty for 4 years. So really thinking about the rich diversity across the industry, and the diversity of thought that comes with that is just absolutely superb. I was talking to the folks earlier about one of my heroes in the gas industry, a woman called Maywin Godbey, who in 1945 presented the only paper presented by a woman in the gas industry throughout all of the junior gas associations, and the courage that she must have had to stand in front of these folks, and then some of the questions they asked her and the comments they asked her, just shocking.
Yeah.
But she stood there and she stood firm. And I actually said to some of women in the room today. Maywin Godby reaches out from 1945 and said, right, now you have the baton. The industry is now yours. And I love what we've got now. I really do. And like I say, I'm, don't dob me in with iGEM, but I'm going to say, I've lost all my certificates. I don't know where they've gone.
Honestly.
Can Nicholas sign me one, please?
Oh. We are so proud of our diversity of thought, our health and safety efforts, our inclusive efforts.
Right, okay.
It really is at the heart and soul of everything we do, as well as innovation. That is such a big thing for us at Skewb. I'd be curious to know, when we're looking to the future, you've both seen such huge strides in the industry from when you were fitting central heating, like when you look to the future, there must be, you strike me as someone who wants to be in on the action.
Yeah.
So when you look to the future, do you think, oh, I wish I could have 20 more years to have a go at that?
So just to kind of finish up, in the vein of looking to the future and thinking about DI and where that goes next. I think, given what's happening in the world right now, we need to reclaim DI from the extremists. And we know who they are. Everybody who's listening to this can see what's happening all over the world, and particularly what's happening in the US now. So we shouldn't lose that. Companies have known that diverse groups of people make great decisions for decades before we even called it something. So we shouldn't lose that. We should continue to do that. So one of the things I'm looking at, and I'm actually part of a New Hampshire Business for Social Responsibility, is how we regain that narrative from the extremists who would seem to want to push us back into into a time we don't want to go to. So that's one of the things I'm excited about the future and that challenge. But the other thing for the industry, the big question for me is, this diversified portfolio. I listened to Governor Healy in Massachusetts. I've known Governor Healy since before she was the governor, and I've known, that she's had some, her preference would be for there not to be a gas industry. I don't think I'm causing anybody a problem. I think she would agree with me if she was sitting where Bob's sitting now. But for me, the question is okay, what does the energy, what is the energy plan for the US? And I really believe that we should be looking more for, rather than just saying that's bad and this is good, we should start to think about what a diversified energy portfolio looks like. Now, if you want an 18-wheeler to go from Boston to California, there aren't enough batteries in the world to power that, but a hydrogen cell, oh, that's interesting there. So again, is there a plan for natural gas? Maybe natural gas-fired power stations. Maybe that's where natural gas comes in, and then the distribution networks are hydrogen. And then that begs the question around, okay, what color hydrogen? Because it all depends on how the electricity is made that generates the hydrogen. So I think this is a great time to join the industry. I think it's an exciting time. And I think there are some real challenges there. And what I keep saying to people is, people in the gas industry is like, the doom and gloom merchants. I'm saying, this is an industry that has been through these challenges before. The people before us have been through. We converted, and my great grandfather they were converting entire networks from dirty old towns gas to clean, or what we know is clean natural gas now.
Yeah.
So the industry has reinvented itself, and the people in this industry are extraordinary people, and we're problem solvers. And we can do this. We can look at the future and say, okay, we have a stake in that. We don't know what it is yet, but we're working on it. Yeah. So I'm not naively optimistic, but cautiously optimistic that there is a future and there is a role for natural gas going forward. But also, I'm excited about the opportunity of what hydrogen can bring. And yeah, I'm not giving up the ship just yet.
Bob, you know Neil better than I. Do we think he's going to sit still from here on?
This Pranzen Pistach. He's only a couple of weeks off. No, I know. I echo what Neil says. I do get a bit frustrated because, Towns gas was 50% hydrogen.
Yeah.
We're arguing now about 25% going back into the network, removing 3.5 million cars effectively. So that frustrates me a little bit, but I think we had a brilliant session with Mike Foster.
Yes.
He painted that balance between, electricity and the electron versus the molecule kind of thing. So there's a place for it all. It needs people with vision, like Mike, like Neil, who can say there's a balance here. There's a balance. And I love the diversity argument because our diversity group idea is close to my heart. It really is close to my heart. So again, there's all these parallels between this. But I think it's a fantastic future.
Yeah.
And I do wish I had 20 years.
Yeah.
Because I've left to see what happens with that cohorting.
Yeah.
In 20 years.
Well, we're not letting go of you anytime soon.
And I care about Nick. I can remember when Nick joined us, we were probably only 20 people. And I thought, wow, Nick Evans had joined us. She walked away from a European MD's job to join Ski. And that told me something's right here. We've got this start right kind of thing. And she's blossomed and the business has blossomed. And it's great to see Neil. It's great to see Nick because we all started on the same sort of background. It's lovely.
Well, it's incredible having you here today and hearing.
We actually go to the same barber as well, have you know?
Neil, we always like to ask by asking for a bit of advice for Skewbers. So this will be shared with Skewbers across the company, some of whom you've met today who are just starting out on their journey, some of whom who've been in the industry for 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
If people are coming to you for your advice and your reflections on your 45 plus years in the industry, what would you say?
So what I'll do is I'll give you kind of a medley of what, if you asked the folks who've worked with me for the last goodness knows how long, So one of the stories I tell is really of when I was an apprentice learning how to use a jackhammer, and I was struggling with it and all kinds of stuff, sweating and all, get stuck, and my crew chief, team leader at the time, said, "You're doing it wrong." So he just showed me, and he literally just glide in, glided out, and he said to me, turned around to me, he said, "Let the tool do the work." And I never forgot that. So the tool can be a physical tool. It could be a wrench, it could be a jackhammer, whatever, but use it right. The tool could be a process. I've looked at all the process stuff. We've got to process stuff. You've got it all over the walls and everything else. That can be the tool. Yeah, let the tool do the work. Or it could be somebody. Who is that person that can unlock that for you? So there's that. There's that part of that. The other thing as well is, so many leaders just want to be an island, leverage you don't know it all. Nobody knows it all. The great leaders leverage the skills and capabilities of the people around them, and they do it in such a way, and we all celebrate together. It's not about me, it's about us. So that's another part of it. And then Artie Georgakopoulos, who I worked with in Grid, he just got made a vice president. I'm thrilled for him. It's well overdue. Anybody from National Grid is listening, it's well overdue. And Artie will say, Neil always said, if you want to get to the Super Bowl, you've got to play the tough teams.
I love that. What a great note to end on. Bob, Neil, thank you very much for your time.